Then I believe you have to accept the prompt for the meeting recording for today. So good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the June 1st meeting of the San Diego Region Conformity Working Group. And it looks like we have just about 17 attendees so far. I know others will be joining us in a little bit, but we have quite a bit to cover on the agenda today. I know we always book out an hour and a half. I don't think it'll take us that full time to get through it, but there's quite a bit for discussion. So first, I will get us up to our introduction section. First, by looking at our commitment to equity adopted by our board as we continue to pursue including and advancing equity through all our planning and programming products and processes. If you'd like to learn more, you can visit our website or ask any staff and we can speak to more to our equity commitments. Getting to first part of our agenda is our welcome and introductions. And as I have done, try and walk through the list of attendees in our webinar and list off the staff or the persons and the agency they're representing or the organization that they're representing. Kind of helps us move through the meeting a little quicker as opposed to doing a round robin of who's all here. So I'll start myself, Sam Sanford with SANDAG. I'm in the interagency coordination team, and I'm joined today by America Sevis on the same team, helping out in the background with the promotion of attendees to panelists and other technical challenges, and also helped generate the agenda and minutes that we'll be covering today. Also from SANDAG today, we have from our modeling team, Joaquin Ortega, from our environmental compliance team, Keith Greer, and you see my eyes scanning, I'm looking through our list of attendees to see who else we have. From our programming team, we have Sue Alpert and Richard Radcliffe. And also from our environmental compliance team, we have Kirsten Uchitel. From Caltrans headquarters, we have Erika Espinosa, Diane Vermeulen, Karishma Becca, Lucas Sanchez, Michelle Blake. I believe that's everyone from Caltrans headquarters. From Caltrans District 11. Oh, we have Maurice Eaton and Michelle Blake. My apologies, Michelle. From CARB, we have Nesamani Kalandur. From the County of San Diego, we have Roya Razulade. From San Diego Air Pollution Control District, we have Nick Cormier. And then from US, let's see, I saw Tom on here. Bear with me as I look at the list as it's updating and re-alphabetizing everybody. Also from Caltrans headquarters, we have Alexi Ariano. And I believe that's everybody I'm seeing right now. And then I believe we have a couple of members of the public. We have Tim Bylash and Catherine Rhodes. I think I caught everybody, but there's a lot of movement going on with the list. So I want to pause here. And as everybody in this meeting, we always promote the full attendance list to panelists, so you have control of your own mics. So if I missed you, please feel free to come off mute and announce yourself. We'll pause here for a minute. And I also see Tom Kelly from US EPA. Thank you for joining us today, Tom. Okay. I'm taking the silence that I might have captured everybody. I'll keep an eye on the attendance list, and as I see others join, can also announce their presence. But with that, we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 2 for today's agenda, which are the public comments, communications, and member comments. So first, I want to ask if there are any comments from the public. Not hearing any, we'll move on to, and I know there are quite a few communication/member comments. I'll go through the few that I know of so far, and then I'll pause to see if there's others that for the benefit of the group. So first, on our RTIP side of the Regional Transportation Improvement Program, I know there are some updates. I'm going to turn it over to Richard Radcliffe on the 2021 RTIP.
Great, thank you, Sam, and good morning, CWG members. Just a quick update. We have currently an amendment 13 to the 2021 RTIP open for project submission. And that amendment, we plan to close on June 3rd and release for the 15-day public comment period and for interagency consultation at the end of next week on June 10th. And that's it.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions on that announcement? Okay, it's a quiet group today. All right. Yes, Tim, please.
Hi, just a quick thing. Will that be posted somewhere? How is it best available?
Yes, we will be posting it on the Sandag website. There will be a listing for it on the public notices page, and then a link to that posting on the RTIP webpage.
Thank you.
Good question. Appreciate that. All right, another announcement I just thought was interesting. I can't speak to how the merits of the meeting, but I thought it was interesting that in the Federal Register, there's an announcement that the Clean Air Act Advisory Committee, something that members of this group or those that are following this group might be interested in, there are a couple public meetings that are coming up. So there's one on June 15th, and then there's another in September, a hybrid meeting as well. So these were all published in the Federal Register on May 19th, if you want to look at the exact details of what's included in that announcement. But it does say that these are open to the public. Public is welcome to make comments as well. And if you're interested in that, to email the group at the CAAAC@epa.gov. If you have any interest, I can also forward you the announcement if easier than writing down the email address. Another announcement was also coming from the Federal Register. And so this was a proposed rule coming from US EPA that was published on May 24th. And it's regarding the 2015 ozone standard and the good neighbor provision on interstate transport. And I believe Tom Kelly is going to help us understand this one a little bit. It's not a process that I have background in or familiarity in. So I want to see if Tom, you can talk us through what this is, and then how it's handled more. I guess it's more at a state level, not affecting regional conformity analysis, if I understand correctly.
That's correct. I'm not as familiar with Zoom. I'm trying, oh, there. I was going to try and turn on the camera there. This is a requirement that dates back up a while. When we first issue a national ambient air quality standard or revise an existing standard to make it lower, there's a host of requirements that kick in. So this isn't really the disapproval that we did is a little different than you might see for some other areas, because I know one of the questions you had was, what does this mean for transportation conformity? Does this have impacts? And it doesn't, because it's a different kind of SIP that's submitted, and it's yeah, I won't try not to get too far into the weeds, but there's just a lot of information the state's supposed to provide that tells us, yes, the state is capable of dealing with this new pollutant. It can be a little less of a interesting process when we're simply lowering the standard, because we know, California has a lot of processes and rules in place to deal with ozone pollution. And so this was just a lowering of the ozone standard. But one of the requirements specifically that gets looped in is for interstate transport, and the good neighbor provisions prohibit one state from impacting non-attainment or maintenance areas in another state. And we set up a 4-step process for dealing with that. The first one was we project into the future, where are those non-attainment and maintenance areas? Where do we think they're going to be in 2023 and 2036, and even as far out as 2032? And just to give you for example, one of the areas that we project as the last on the East Coast to attain is Connecticut. And it's not because Connecticut has a lot of pollution sources. It's because Connecticut is receiving pollution from a lot of other upwind states, Pennsylvania. I see a hand already. Is that for me?
No, it's for another comment.
Okay, should I continue on, Sam?
Yes, please do. Yeah.
Okay, so we do this modeling, look at where we think there are going to be non-attainment concerns in the future. And for California, we link them to significant non-attainment areas in Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and Colorado. And California was working at the time they gave us a submittal to deal with this, they were working off older modeling that we had done. So it wasn't the most recent. It had only linked them to a couple of those areas, only Nevada and Arizona, or only Colorado and Arizona. And so that was one problem that caused us the need to disapprove it. And then the third and fourth steps are, so what can be done about it? We're not looking for, an upwind state to solve the problem of the downwind state, because obviously, these downwind areas, they have to make their own efforts to attain the NAAQS, but we want to make sure the upwind areas, if they're contributing significantly, that they're making steps towards helping the downwind areas as well. We've done this for ozone a few times around. In the past, when we've done it, we've been strictly focused on energy generation units. And that has tended to mean coal-fired power plants. So in Nevada, for example, this rule is, squarely aimed at a large coal-fired power plant, and we'll be looking to reduce significant emissions from there. The energy generation units in California largely comply with anything that we would put in place through this rule. So we're not seeing this rule affecting those energy generation sources. For the first time now, we looked at sources beyond just those units and specifically investigated a number of large industrial sources, cement kilns, pumps that move natural gas along pipelines, some glass facilities, some iron and steel facilities, and there's one other category. There was another category that it was large boilers, and I think there might have been one large boiler affected in California. It's not that many facilities that are actually being affected, but there are a handful in different locations. The ones the pumps, and I'm not using quite the right word there, but the turbines that move natural gas around, those are getting affected in several locations in the state. The information we seem to have so far indicates, although California has several cement plants, it doesn't look like those would have to make any changes in order to comply with the standards that we do as a result of this. So we just didn't get enough information in California in those third and fourth steps. How can you reduce emissions to these other areas? In the past, California was largely able to say, hey, we have a lot of stringent standards. We think we are doing enough. And we agreed with them, but this time around we did not. So we'll be potentially, that if this gets finalized, it would put in place those requirements. It goes a bit hand in hand. There's the action that you saw was a disapproval. In April 6th, we issued a federal implementation plan, and that would cover 26 states around the country. So that's when I mentioned Nevada and some of those other areas of the country. That would include California, Nevada, many other states in these tighter rules for energy generation units and for those other industrial kind of sources to make sure that they reduce emissions. There are other options that could be done. California could say, hey, we have plans in place to further reduce mobile sources, and we're going to do that instead. There are other options for moving forward, and California may well choose to do those. We'll just have to see how they are. But in terms of what we were looking at for that good neighbor provision was simply the submittal we had before us. And we were feeling like California was relying on a bit older modeling and didn't give us quite enough to go on in terms of what sources we would need to do equivalent kind of reductions that we're seeing from that federal implementation plan that we just proposed on April 6th. So that's why we proposed a disapproval. We are under a court deadline to finalize the action for California by the middle of December. So it hopefully was clear enough, but I'm happy to answer any questions if folks have it about this.
That was very helpful. I appreciate that. I see two hands up. I see Tim Balash, you have your hand up. I don't know if that's new or if that was left over.
Listen, there's things on the agenda here. It's I think a little more informal. I'd like to hear what the other reports are maybe before commenting. It has to do with air pollution mostly, but so this isn't a time for public comments, but we'll have time as each of these agenda items come up, and hopefully if it crosses, it'll be okay.
Absolutely, yes.
All right, great, thanks.
Yeah. Catherine.
Hi, yes, I just have non-agenda public comment if I may.
Yeah, please.
Wonderful. Hello, my name is Catherine Rhodes. My comments are for John Kelly of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, and SANDAG staff. At the April 8th, 2022 SANDAG tour of State Route 11 and Otay Mesa East Port of Entry, SANDAG CEO stated there was a new state and federal alternative project delivery method and joint venture agreement created between SANDAG, Caltrans State and Federal Agency, Border Patrol in Mexico to finance and build the Otay Mesa East Port of Entry project. The alternative project delivery method was allowed by a new state law in Street and Highway Code Section 31460 through 82, the Otay Mesa East Toll Facility Act. Not sure, but I believe the Federal General Service Administration or another federal department are usually the planners and builders of these types of federal port of entry projects, not SANDAG staff. I am recommending that the EPA, SANDAG, and Mexico look into creating a similar new federal alternative project delivery method like Otay Mesa East for the raw sewage border patrol issue with Mexico along the Tijuana River. Now, everyone is blaming the EPA for not moving fast enough to stop the ongoing pollution using the $630 million awarded to the EPA for border infrastructure, I think last year. A new law and agreement with EPA Mexico, with SANDAG's border committee in charge with EPA oversight and collaboration, could speed up construction. And a new alternative project delivery method would allow for local control by having the EPA allow SANDAG's border committee to take over development of EPA-funded border infrastructure cleanup projects in order to cut through bureaucracy and move the project toward completion with known timelines, again with oversight by the EPA. Imperial Beach Mayor Serge Dodina was positive of the idea of moving EPA projects to SANDAG control if possible. What does the EPA think about this idea to give the work of project management and construction to SANDAG staff instead? In order to do this, you probably need a new state law, federal EPA approval for a joint venture, and an international agreement with Mexico. Your new alternative project delivery method worked great for Route 11 and Otay Mesa East Coast point of entry. With leadership, the same model for an alternative project delivery method can work for the EPA and local residents who want immediate results from the EPA for this ongoing border sewage problem. And so I'm just asking the EPA and Sandag staff to just kind of think about analyzing this new idea. And I'm going to also bring it up at the Transportation Committee on Friday. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Catherine, for sharing. I think of other groups, and I'm happy to pass this along to my counterparts at Sandag that are working on border related items as well. We also have a committee on border items that goes by the acronym COBRA. But I'm happy to pass it along to the coordinator of that meeting as well, so he's aware of this idea. Since there's membership from both the US side and Mexico side, government and civil society as well. So thank you for sharing. Any other announcements for the benefit of the group? Or questions on prior announcements? Okay, I'm not hearing any. We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is actually kind of a recap of our last meeting, which was April 6th, is when we had our last CWG meeting, and we have the minutes are posted in our today's agenda packet, and it starts on page 2 of the more simplified agenda packet. You might have seen that the agendas kind of took a different shape with this round, more straightforward. And as a reminder, the CWG doesn't take any action on items. We simply review. If there are any comments or corrections, we're happy to take those, and we'll make those changes prior to posting. So are there any comments or questions or corrections on the minutes from the April 6th meeting of the CWG? Not hearing any. We'll get into the reports, kind of the main subjects of today's meeting. The first item being the 2023 Regional Transportation Improvement Program, Air Quality Conformity Analysis and Demonstration. So for this, I'll be co-presenting with Richard Radcliffe and our Sandag programming team, and we'll walk through the documents that have been shared. So on Friday, May 20th, staff distributed the 2023 RTIP conformity documentation, and that includes Chapter 5 and Appendix F of the draft 2023 RTIP. That distribution kicked off the 30-day consultation window. We're requesting any comments by June 20th. And we've already received some comments, so thank you to those who have already provided some comments. And in these documents were also included in today's agenda. And there are a few pages that have markups from comments received or changes, and those are denoted with strike through and for sections that were deleted, and red font for additions, so you can clearly see what the changes were. And for this review, I'm going to switch over to an Adobe window so we can actually see the agenda text. So here we're looking at the agenda, and Chapter 5 really starts on page 6. So I'm just going to come up here. And actually, if I could get confirmation that you guys can still see my screen.
Yep, we can, Sam.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Usually there's a little green highlight around the screen to advise the presenter that you're sharing the right screen, and it disappeared on me. So the attachments we're going to be talking through start on page 6 of today's agenda packet. And this is starting with Chapter 5. And Chapter 5 is really a high-level summary of the conformity analysis, the procedures, and then finally the results of that. Most of our conversation is going to focus on Appendix F, which gets more into the details of what the analysis was, what was included, kind of recapping many of the assumptions and pieces that were presented back in March. One key piece in Chapter 5 are the transportation control measures. And so for that, I'm going to advance us a couple pages and turn it over to Richard, who will walk us through Table 5.1.
Great, thanks, Sam. So Table 5-1, there it is, shows how the 2023 RTIP supports the 4 approved transportation control measures, which are ride sharing, transit improvements, and bicycle facilities and traffic flow improvements. The 2023 RTIP programs approximately $8.6 billion, which represents about 48% of the total $18 billion of funds programmed. $92 million has been included for ride sharing. 7.9 billion has been included for transit improvements. 491 million has been included for bicycle facilities, and 143 million has been included for traffic flow improvements.
All right. Thank you, Richard. And just as a reminder, these are the 4 federally approved transportation control measures, or TMCs, or TCMs, and that SANDAG has met its commitment to these TCMs, but continues to support and program projects in these categories to further support, and also they're good projects to continue to include. So that's the TCM table that I wanted to cover. Before we advance into Appendix F, I want to pause and see if there's any questions on this one. Okay, not seeing anyone or seeing any hands raised or cameras coming on. I'm going to go ahead and advance on to, yeah, did I just see a hand raise?
Yes, Tim just raised his hand.
Yeah, Tim Bylash again, Delmar. Just a quick comment about this. I apologize, haven't had a chance to go through this first time, really my seeing it, but it seems to me over the places I've lived and times that public perception of these important issues is doesn't sort of leak out, and particularly part of the misinformation, or I would call it misinterpretation. And you know, so what parts of the budgets are being thought about to deal with the media in terms of getting more accurate information and turnaround, rather than having an essay by a blogger go up on somebody's op-ed page and then spending times trying to deal with this. So I look at these improvement budgets and just wonder where that enters into it, if this is an appropriate comment. Thank you.
Thank you. So for these transportation control measures, or they're also called transportation tactics, these date back to prior state implementation plans. They are specific categories of projects that transportation agencies were asked to include into these SIPs in order to demonstrate attainment. So it's going back to quite a while ago to demonstrate compliance with the requirement is really what these are showing.
And so these are compliance to agencies that are funding it primarily?
No, SANDAG has already made compliance with the original commitments, but this is a demonstration that we continue to see it as good practice and want to continue to support it regardless.
All right, thank you.
So just as a little bit of background on this group, it's really focused on federal conformity specifically, and there's lots of other planning pieces that feed into it, but it's really a consultation process with many of our federal and state partners, just so we can share what we anticipate doing in each step as we progress through the process, to make sure that if there are any questions on assumptions that staff have made or model inputs, that's caught early on, and we can have a candid discussion about how to improve it or address it before it gets into the final document. So that way, when in this case, we're talking about the program of projects, when that goes for federal approval at Federal Highway Administration, they fully understand what was included in all the steps. and they've been brought along the way as it progresses. If that helps a little bit on the background. All right. Not seeing any other hands. I'm going to go ahead and advance us to the beginning of Appendix F, which is page 14 of today's agenda. And here we can see the front page and a little bit of correction in language on maintenance areas that John Kelly provided. So thanks to John for that. I did not know the change or graduation from a maintenance out into an attainment area is an option. Areas can choose to do it or not to do it. So this is kind of the beginning of Appendix F. For the following 2 pages, it really just goes through background, history of conformity. Much of the material really starts on page 16, which is where we start getting into the modeling procedures. And for modeling procedures, there's several sections. We have our growth model, or forecast, I should say, our transportation model, and emissions model. So it first jumps into the growth forecasts, which start on page 17. And should note that the transportation model and the growth forecasts and the emissions model is all consistent with what was used for the 2021 regional plan. The same exact elements were used. So in this case, on the growth forecast, we are using the Series 14 regional growth forecast for the sustainable community strategies land use pattern. And that's depicted here in the chart, the line graph, and then a table below has specific figures for horizon years. So that's the regional growth forecast piece. And back in March, we had David Tedrow from our forecasting development team walk us through that process as well. On the, if I just advance to the bottom of this page, we get into our travel model, what I was calling our transportation model. And here we are using the activity-based model version 2 plus. So ABM 2 plus is the acronym we've given to that one. Again, staying consistent with what we had for the 2021 regional plan. And that 2 plus just added a little bit of more functionality within our agency. The next several pages, almost dozen pages, really dive into what ABM 2 plus has in it, the submodels, the components, the assumptions, time of day travel, how the synthetic population is generated, lots of material. That material is the same material as was provided in the 2021 regional plan. There were no updates to that. So if you're familiar with that part, you're familiar with this one as well. But I just want to highlight, so if you've already read those dozen or so pages, those are the same. The next section, also on the modeling side, is just getting into the emissions model, and that starts on page 39 of today's agenda. And so for the 2023 RTIP, we're using MFAC 2017 version 1.0.3. So it's the latest one from CARB that we're using for this effort. And before I jump into the next section, because this kind of wraps up the modeling piece, I want to pause and see if there's any questions on either the growth forecast, travel model, or emissions modeling. Okay. Not seeing any. Ernest Amani, do you have a comment?
Yeah, no, just, hey, Sam, thanks. Good morning, everyone. Just a quick clarification, Sam, just want to make sure that the MFAC model you used, you didn't account for any adjustment for recently adopted regulations. Am I right in understanding that? That's how I read it, but I just want to doubly make sure that that's true. Like
that is correct.
Yes. Okay, good. Thanks, Sam. Thanks.
Yeah, we are using MFAC 2017 version 1.0.3 as it comes from CARB. Yeah, no additional off-model adjustments to that.
Okay, Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Thanks for, this is a good clarification. And so I should clarify, no off-model adjustments in the penalty as in safe rule. Those are no longer being applied, nor are there any kind of beneficial off-model adjustments from recently adopted regulations either.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
Good. All right. Moving down on to page 43, this would be where we will have our analysis. And this is also captured in chapter 5, but I wanted to spend a little bit more time on it here in the appendix. So this is essentially the modeling analysis for the transportation network with all the projects in the 2023 RTIP. Going down the left-hand side, we have the analysis years, which were chosen following the attainment dates and also the significant progress dates for both the 2008 and 2015 ozone standard. And then also we added years 2040 to have increments of at least, or I should say at most 10 years. And we included 2050 as the ultimate horizon year for our regional plan. We also have the vehicle starts in thousands, the average vehicle miles that come out of the model again in thousands. Then we have a section for ROG, our reactive organic gases, the budget for our reactive organic gases by our 2020 SIP, and also the emissions that came out of the model. And as we look through each row, we can see that the emissions are lower than the budgets for both ROG and for the oxides of nitrogen and NOx categories as well. And we did use the 10th, and for our significant figures, we look at the 100th place, and if there's any value in the 100th place, we round up, following kind of the budget process. And then I want to pause here and see if there are any questions on the results table. Yes, Tim Balash.
Yeah, hi, thanks for taking my comment. I'm looking at the 2050 projection for table F9 of an increase from 85,000 to 88,000 average weekday vehicle miles. And one of the things that I've been trying to learn more about is the desires for the outlying regions to have more direct single car access to wherever they want to go. And part of the regional transportation plan, I think, is taking that into account. So I see a kind of what I would consider a small bump up from now in terms of total vehicle miles traveled. And that just seems a little optimistic from a cursory point of view. I was wondering if you had a comment.
That's a good observation. One thing that has, and I'll also pass this on if Joaquin from our modeling team has other insights on this, but one significant change between the 2021 regional plan, which this is based on, and the assumptions are consistent between that planning document and this programming document, is that the expected growth for our region is much flatter than it had been in prior plans. So if we look back at our 2015 regional plan, there was significant growth in population and land use change over the course of the 30+ years of the plan at that time. We've used the Department of Finance growth forecasts, and those were updated in, I believe it was 2020 or late 2019, and it's a much flatter increase. It's a very small change over time. So that addresses part of it. I want to pause here, see if Joaquin, if you have any additional comments or thoughts on that one.
Hello, Sam, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, this is Joaquin Ortega from the modeling department at Sandag. I would just recommend for further reading and resources would be Appendix D of the 2021 regional plan that goes into a lot of the details and elements that were considered as part of the plan and how they're reflected in the model. Thank you.
Thank you,
Joaquin.
If I could just follow up, I'll take a good look at that, and I appreciate it. some of the cities over my own lifetime has been the emigration from the cities to the rural areas and rural areas back to cities. And those trends tend to change. And I will be looking at the report particularly for that, because if I were a student coming to San Diego, I would want to live here then. And so I would go to the outlying regions. And so the population changes may not alter much in the average, but the distribution of those people may have some impacts, and I'll be looking for that. So thank you for that information.
And discussion of the growth forecast that was used for the sustainable community strategy, which is also reflected in the materials that Samuel's presenting currently, that can be found in Appendix F. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good discussion. Thank you. Any other questions on the results table? Okay. Well, the next piece would be the exempt projects list, and we're actually going to come back to that in just a little bit because we have some separate slides to cover the exempt projects. So I'm going to jump down to page 45 of the agenda, gets into the consultation process. So this section of the appendix really documents what's required in the conformity consultation process and also what has been done to date. And so it goes through, what happened in March with sharing the schedule, the assumptions, and the process for consultation criteria and procedures for conformity. In April, the distribution of the project lists, and now getting into May, the distribution of the results and the process, or the documentation of the process, and now June, as we go through sharing that information and getting feedback from the public and the members of the CWG. The 2023 RTIP is also expected to go to the Transnet Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee in July, and that'll be followed by the Transportation Committee and the board, where it's expected to be released for public comment, a 30-day comment period, starting in July 22nd. And after that, it'll go back to the board for approval. Any questions on the consultation process, steps in between, or future steps? All right. Last few sections here, folks. Starting on page 47, we get into our project lists, and these lists are very consistent with the 2021 regional plan. There are a few updates on open to traffic dates on a few projects and scope descriptions. But just for orientation, to help out for those that might have not have been involved with the regional plan approach, there are a series of corridors, and as highlighted in this map, and projects are listed in tables by the corridor they fall within or closest to. So you can see the corridors on this map in different colors, and the legend off to the left that shows their name. Below this, we have tables by corridor, starting with South Bay to Sorrento, also called SBS2, and the projects within it. So all these projects were included in the air quality conformity analysis, and it has details about those projects. Those are for the regional project, large projects. We also have a table for arterial projects, which starts on page 62. And so these projects are listed by their Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP ID number. Also includes the conformity analysis year, the lead agency, project title, and then the description, which we also refer to as the project scope. And this is, again, largely the same as what was shared with the 2020 regional plan. There were approximately 15 projects in the arterial list that had updates. 11 of those were just changes to their open to traffic date, but within the same conformity analysis period. 2 that had changes pushing out their project open to traffic date to a later analysis period, and then 2 that had minor updates to their description or scope. The next piece I want to jump to is the exempt projects, and then we'll pause again and see if there are any questions on the project side. So for the exempt projects, I'm going to turn it over to Richard.
Thanks, Sam. So we shared the draft 2023 RTIP project list with the CWG last month in April. And while the list of projects is mostly the same, there has been a couple of changes, and I'd like to briefly go over those. So this table here is a list of new exempt projects that are being added to the 2023 RTIP. The projects on this list are consistent with the draft project list that was shared April 1st and discussed on April 6th. There were 32 new exempt projects being added in the 2023 RTIP that were included on the list shared in April. Many of the new exempt projects are active transportation projects and are located in various areas throughout the region. There were 2 City of Coronado projects listed previously, Coronado 26 and Coronado 27, which have since been combined into one project, which will be Coronado 27, which is included on this table. And Sam, if you can go to the next. Thank you. And now this table shows the single new exempt project that was added since we shared the draft project list. The project description has been included on this table for this project to show that the project is exempt in scope. The project is the Escondido Creek Trail Project, which is another active transportation project in the city of Escondido.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions for Richard or I on the projects included in the 2023 RTIP? All right. Not hearing any. This actually wraps up this item. Yeah, Tim Balash.
I hope this is an appropriate place. I just want to say this is quite an awesome report. I'm seeing it for the first time, and I can only imagine the effort and expertise that's gone into it. I'll try to digest it further over the next month. I wanted to mention 2 things. These are for hydrocarbons, it looks like, emissions. And sometimes we look at only one thing. I know some other members of the SANDAG boards as well, or committees have raised these points. But 2 of the issues that I'm concerned about as a physician, and also for climate change, are particulate matter and water vapor. They are contributing a huge amount to the chemistry in the upper atmosphere, as I understand, but also in terms of not just the health, but the meeting climate change goals. And I realize this is for the hydrocarbon parts of it, it looks like, but would just bring that up to keep that in the back of our minds. The other thing is, when I was a kid, we were coming back from the candy store, and one of the kids dropped a wrapper on the ground. So I picked it up and put it in my pocket, and he started to yell at me. He said, no, they hire people to do that. And so my own perspective, having seen some of the production factories or not engineers, people who make stuff in production, that you clean it up better than when you left it. And as well, you know, when I was a kid cutting grass, our neighbor would come over and cut the strip by his house. It would save me time because I was getting behind. And my friend over in Missouri, he edges everybody's lawn because his thing is going and it just takes him an extra 5 minutes. And so I kind of think of it as a little bit of a jargon, maybe, that restitute if you pollute. There are people who believe that they shouldn't clean up their own messes, and we should clean it up better than we left it. And I think as a general principle, we get into the technical details trying to legally hold people responsible, but there's a lot of the public that I think needs to be pulled in with it. So thank you for this report. I will look at it closely, and hope these comments are appropriate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate that. Okay. So that wraps up agenda item number 4. And now we're going to move on to agenda number 5, the 2020 Ozone SIP implementation plan update. And so this is a plan that was developed by San Diego Air Pollution Control District, submitted to CARB, and then submitted to US EPA for approval. And it's in that process right now. So I'm going to ask John Kelly and Nick Cormier if there are any updates on the status of this plan.
Yeah, Sam, are you able to hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I just got my computer redone, so this is the first thing right out of the gate. But yeah, I don't have much to share on my end in terms of an update on what was presented for the last time. So maybe perhaps I'll just turn it over to John to see if he's got anything to share at this point.
Just that I'm still getting through the my review of it and my write-up of a draft proposal. Everything looks good to me. It's impressive. It's quite a monumental document and feat, I would say. You know, it's being like a severe plan for 2 standards. You know, it's kind of a big deal. So I'm probably running a little bit behind on my hoped for schedule. I wanted to be proposing something this summer. That could still happen. I would love to finalize my action by the end of September, which is the end of our fiscal year, just for administrative reasons, you know. Yeah, I mean, I'm just working along.
Thank
And
you,
maybe I
Nick
can
and
just
John.
share. I can just share a little bit because I know there's a few folks that may have not been on previous meetings, so I may have been too cavalier in what I said. But what I can share, at least on our end, just for background for people who aren't aware, you know, this is a plan that addressed our ozone non-attainment status in San Diego County for the 2008 and 2015 national ozone standards. This was a required attainment plan that we needed to prepare. And so APCD prepared this plan along with the help of the California Air Resources Board and along with the guidance with EPA. And that plan was prepared in 2020. It was approved by our board at the time, and then it was approved by the California Air Resources Board in short order after that. It was a few months after that, and it was submitted to EPA shortly, a couple months after that. And so at this point, it's just waiting on the approval process, the review process for EPA. And so, like John was saying, we're hoping to, see the action on that later this year, and it will be, I think it'll be a good thing to have that plan. There was a lot of work put into that plan over a number of years. And so we're going to be happy to hopefully see some action on it, which is something that I don't think we've had EPA act on a plan in quite a bit, at least on an attainment plan. So, and that's not the fault of them by any stretch. So we'll be happy to see that come through in the next couple of months. So I'm happy to take any questions if there are any, though.
Thank you, Nick and John. Any questions on the 2020 SIP? All right. Well, thank you both for the update. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Next up, we have on our report section is, again, a repeating item on updates, really, on the emission factors, or MFAC 2021 update, which was developed by CARB and has been submitted to US EPA for review and approval. And I want to turn it over to Nesamali Kalandiur to see if there are any updates on the status of this model review.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Good morning, everyone. It's just last time, I think, if I remember, I think I briefly mentioned about the bug that CARB staff found in the MFAC 2021 model. We fixed it and we released early May the model is released for public. We also fixed along with it the MFAC web platform. So that's also released, both versions of the models released out. And we are working on a formal submittal to US EPA. The letter has been drafted and it's with the management, so it should be going anytime this month. I know we are in June 1st today, so that's what I just want to make sure I'm talking the right month here. So hopefully we'll be submitting this next week or two, and then we'll be able to move forward from there. And then US EPA staff is already working on the SIP-up, the Federal Register notice itself. So hopefully we should be able to move forward soon on that. That's my quick update. I'll be happy to expand or talk about anything regarding the MFAC 2021 model.
Thank you, Nasamani. Any questions on MFAC 2021? I'm sorry, I think I misspoke on the already submitted to US EPA. So thank you for that clarification.
You're right. I think we submitted the original version, but this is an updated version. So it's
Okay.
fine. Thank you.
All right, not seeing any hands raised or hearing anybody. Just have one more quick item. Thank you, Nasamani. So, and this is item 7 on the reconsideration of the safe vehicles rule, part 1. And I believe we're kind of wrapping up with this item, and we might not need to have it on the agenda anymore as far as a recurring item. But I did want to bring to the group's attention that on May 2nd of this year, NHTSA, or the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, released their final fuel economy standards for passenger cars and light duty trucks. So this is the CAFE standards. So they have their final version for model years 2024, and then they kind of have a incremental progress approach for later model year vehicles. So in that notice, or the final rule, it does state that NHTSA's obligation to revisit the standards from the safe vehicle rules has now been completed. So I think with that, we are good. It'll just be a matter of tracking this final rule and then working on how to document it, I guess, in future demonstration efforts. But I want to pause here, see if there's any announcements related to this or comments or questions. Not hearing any. I think this is one of those that we've discussed in the past, that at some point in the future, there will be updates to models as necessary to capture the new CAFE standards, the new fuel efficiency standards of vehicles, to capture this new rule going into effect. All right. No comments or questions on this item. We'll talk about our upcoming meeting, which is scheduled for July 6th of this year. Same time, same place. And if there's nothing else, that does it for today. So I want to say thanks to everyone for your attendance, participation, engagement, and good questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Sam.
See you next time.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Sam.
Thanks, Sam. Bye.